All right, hey, welcome to Sunday Evening Live. We're glad to have you join us this evening as we've been going through in Sunday evenings, listening to folks' testimony of how they've come to know the Lord, what the Lord's done in their life. You've got some of the regulars here. You've got the guru of IT, Thomas Miller, as he keeps us running and keeps us going. And so if you're not seeing us, then you're just not seeing us. But Thomas does a great job, and I'm so thankful for him. You got Chris down here at the other end as he is just doing your thing, man.
Hanging out, man.
That's it. Reverend Wayne Law didn't make it this evening, but he said he's watching on Facebook. So Wayne, if you're watching us, you have any questions, man, send those in. And that's for any of y'all. If you have any questions or comments that you would like to make as we go through this, please send those in. Thomas will let us know, and then we'll try to answer them or do whatever else we need to do. But I'm especially thrilled tonight because we've got Mr. Craig Coleman, a institution of Troy, I guess.
That's right.
The famous man of Troy.
Staple.
That's right. Craig has come in and he's joining us this evening to share his testimony and what the Lord has done in his life, and I'm excited about it. Craig is just such a good guy and just such a wonderful heart that the Lord has given him, and the things that you do, Craig, for this community, and just people have the trash cans out. You're the guy that sees them and hauls them back to their house and different things, and just doing things, blessing people in that way. And so again, if you've got any comments or questions, or if our live studio audience, hey Joan, has any comments, just shout them up here for us and that. But Craig, it's good to have you here, man.
Well, it's good to be here. Good to be here. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to do this. First person ever I've ever had anybody ask me to share my testimony, and I think it's very important for people to not only understand how you came in to meet the Lord, but it's definitely a process. It's not where you wake up one morning and say, oh, well, I follow Jesus. No, it doesn't work that way. It is a process. And as you all know, even when you get baptized, it's still a process. It's not just holy water hits you and you're there all of a sudden. But I'm going to basically start. Anyone that knows me well knows I'm very long-winded, but you're only giving me roughly an hour, so I'm going to do my best.
It's 30 minutes, Craig.
Exactly.
But if you want to go an hour, man, we'll stick with you. That's okay.
But I came to Troy probably about 79, 80 is when I came to Troy. Many of the audience here in Troy does not know this, but this is something I'm sharing for the very first time. I was adopted from an infant, and the reason why I'm saying that, it doesn't discredit my parents for any reasons for adopting me. I would always like to share as much as I can about whether you're a single parent, whether you're a blended family, whether you're adopted, whatever the case is, it's not the child's fault. And I can say this now as an adult, not as a kid.
Right.
So even though I don't have kids of my own, with me being a substitute school teacher, I like to tell all the kids, I don't have kids of my own, but I like to love on your kids, good and bad, but I was one of those kids, where I grew up here at First Baptist Troy. How I found this church, my mom and dad separated when I was going into third grade. And we lived probably, matter of fact, our house is still standing. Our mother sold it, I guess a little after high school. She sold it, needed the money, and sold it, which I had already moved away. And she said her thing, well, first of all, I didn't grow up in a household where we spoke a lot about education. We just did not, okay? My mother spoke of the Lord, and the short period of time I remember from my adopted father, he spoke of me playing football. That was it. He wanted me to play pro football. Those are the two things that went on in my household. So when we moved to Troy, it was down in Houston area, a little town called Wharton. When we moved to Troy, my mom, her biggest thing was go find a church. That was her biggest thing. She didn't care where. We were in a situation where we didn't understand, I guess, with us being a black family, we didn't understand the mixing of the races and things of that nature, but our mother never taught us that either. So that's why I've grown up to be a person where it's been very easy for me to just love people. Love people. Yes, you have good, bad, or indifferent, but still, people are people. People go through things. If you say you're not going through something, you're not human.
Amen.
I mean,
That's right.
point blank. So I came to know the Lord shortly after, probably within a couple years of me going to Troy, things of that nature. Some of the people that are listening to this broadcast know Lee and Irma Hendrix, they were Christians and members of his church for a very long time. Well, Lee Hendrix had a beard halfway down his chest, almost to his waistline, and really tall, long arms, and he rode Harleys. So anyway, he used to also ride with the Hells Angels, which, you know, they were always visualized as just really, really bad people. But the more and more I got to know him and his family, I understood that he also, I'll just say he gave me stories that said, as a little kid, it is what it is, it's a story. But he would tell me stories. He said, you know what, there's some things that we did that weren't so great, but there's also a lot of things that we did that were for the good. And with that being said, again, we as people, we sin every single day. Again, if you don't, you're not human. I would like to meet you, on earth. I watched Lee build a Harley Davidson, and I saw a motorcycle sitting in his garage. I'd go another day, and it's just nothing but parts. Totally break it down, totally build it up, things like that. So that's how, and the reason why I'm bringing that story in is because it was the Hendrix, Clayton Sue Bell. I mean, there was a multitude of people that made us feel welcome, even though we were the only little black kids in an all-white church. We didn't know anything about anything. Our mother said just walk to a church. Well, we could have very easily made that left at the fork up there and went toward Grant Chapel at the time. But for whatever reason, we walked this way. The very first one we saw was First Baptist Troy. And in the beginning, again, it wasn't great, but because of the multitude of people within the church made it great at some point in time. I got to know the two families I just talked about. And I remember the very first time Lee asked me, he said, do you and your brother Guy, do y'all want to come to the house for lunch? We had no idea what that meant. We're like, are we being kidnapped? I mean, seriously.
I understand, yeah.
I mean, what exactly is going on here? And then on top of that, I felt like it was an insult to my mother because she was at home. She didn't really get out. Once we moved to Troy, she didn't get out too much. Well, I thought this was an insult to her to go to someone else's house and eat. Because Mama's not with us and we're not with her, so what does that mean? And I mean, again, you're a little, probably 10-year-old kid trying to figure all this out. And it took probably almost 2 years. And I finally said something to my mom. I built up enough courage, and she said, well, why don't y'all go? And I was like, oh, I could have asked you, a long time ago, obviously with this. And it got to the point, there's different people that I feel like is responsible. Again, the the Bells, the Hendrix, also the Ellis family. Y'all know Sandy Ellis, late Don Ellis.
Yes.
Well, Sandy Ellis was one that, again, you're being put in a situation where you don't understand what exactly is going on. And there was probably 2 or 3 Christmases where we went and we had absolutely nothing. Because, I mean, we didn't have the money. We were very, very poor. Once Sandy Ellis, we came to church, and we would walk, we probably mile and a half out west is where we live. Mm-hmm. We would walk from church to church and walk home. Wouldn't say a word to anybody. And then somebody started noticing those little boys are walking back and forth. And then we had like Linda Lane Tomlin, J.D. Tomlin. I mean, that family, they would give us rides because they lived out west. So that's how I guess the relationship started. You know, all of a sudden, all these people are like, hey, you need this, you need that. Cool. Sandy sat down with my mother. And it was more of an embarrassment than anything, because as a little kid, you don't want anybody to come to your house. You didn't want them to know you didn't have indoor plumbing. You had an outhouse. You had all these things, but we had love. Mm-hmm. And it's so hard in this day and time for the kids to understand about not having just stuff. Yeah. And I mean, and seriously, and I've had people say, well, you know what, you don't have kids. No, but I was a kid.
Yeah.
I did without as a kid. I'm not saying your kids should never have anything, but they should understand, especially Christmas, it's become so commercialized now. It's like, let's make a long list of everything we want and put pressure on mommy and daddy to get it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's very unfortunate. But, you know, it's like, well, what is the real meaning of Christmas? Let's get back to that. Mm-hmm. You know, yes, it's okay to have presents and gifts and things of that nature. So from there, we want to move along to, I guess, my mother, her hometown was Elgin, down by Taylor Bastrop area.
Sure.
And they're famous for their Elgin hot sausage.
I was just thinking that. That's a good.
And so my junior year, not a lot of people know this either, but my junior year, I had the opportunity to, my mom decided she was going to move back to Elgin, her hometown. And I was a junior, and she said, well, this is what we're doing. I said, well, I don't want to go. Believe it or not, she allowed me, because of my maturity, I'm not bragging, but I'm just saying because due to my maturity, she allowed me. And she said, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do that? And I said, we don't have a phone. We don't have any indoor plumbing to be concerned with. All we have is electric bill. So I went to people's houses. I was one of those kids that would walk up to your door and say, can I mow your lawn? Oh, I need to use your lawnmower too. Seriously, I didn't have a lawnmower, so that's how I earned, you know, my keep. My junior prom, I paid for it myself. My senior prom, I paid for it myself. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with hard work. But again, I'm not sitting here patting myself on the back. I'm giving that credit to God, giving that credit to my mother. Seriously, because my mother, for a long time, she was mother and father. Mm-hmm. And some kids don't understand that in a sense that mother may be a single parent, but she might be struggling financially, making sacrifices along the way, just as my mother did.
Exactly.
And I didn't see as a kid some of the sacrifices she did. As we grew older, we did. And real quickly back to, I was very curious about, there was a picture I had, back to the adoption thing. Mm-hmm. There was a picture I had, and it had a different last name on it. And I was like, that's how I got curious. Well, that was the one and only conversation me and my mother had. Why? Because I could see, I don't know what word to use, but she just had a look about her like I was just going to up and leave and go live with my birth parents. Right. So since I saw that look on her face, I never brought up the conversation again. And again, just because you're in a blended family, so to speak, or adopted family, does not mean there has to be an ounce less of love in that family. And the biggest reason, again, why I wanted to say that part is because, again, there may be kids out there that just don't understand why you're in the situation you're in, okay? I want you to understand that your parents might be doing the best they can. Maybe they make mistakes, because we all do. But the biggest thing we can do for each other is pray, okay? So to forward on to when I graduated high school, went right into the workforce, had various jobs. Not saying I wasn't happy about the jobs, but I wasn't excited about the amount of jobs I had versus someone that went to a 4-year university and got an education. But to me, it was work straight out of high school. But that's all I knew. Seriously, that is all I knew. Then from there, I spent various years in Dallas-Fort Worth. I spent time in Galveston, about 3 or 4 years, about 3 or 4 years in Waco. But majority of the time I spent in Fort Worth. And I have had, I guess, probably a little over 20 years now, I've had some health problems, which all of you know about. Diabetes, neuropathy, kidney issues in the past, things of that nature. But it hit me when I was in Fort Worth probably not quite 3 years ago now, and that was when I came back to Troy. It just hit me all of a sudden. I needed to come home where I knew and understood the people that cared about me and loved me. Yes, there's a lot of people that has transplanted themselves here from other places, but that happens everywhere you live, okay? But there's still some good-hearted people here in Troy, and there's some people that I've met that I've never met before and has done so much for me. Now, when I went through my, both my pinky toes are missed, when I went through my first amputation, that's when I moved back to Troy. Depression is probably the biggest reason why I moved back to Troy, okay? Because I don't care how much God you have in your heart, again, you still have things that you deal with. Even with being a pastor, you're still gonna have emotions that you deal with, that y'all deal with on a daily basis. So it was more of it was that, but especially when I was in the oil field, I made great money, but I wasn't out there long enough to really say, oh, okay, I'm really, really making great money. God worked, I don't want to say against me, I'd rather say for me. And the reason why I say that, because anything that's ever happened negative to me, I've never blamed God. I really haven't. Have I blamed situations and got frustrated and angry? Absolutely, okay? But when I was in the oil field is when I started having issues with one of my toes. Well, they ended up releasing me because oil fields 24/7, 365. I mean, if you're gone for 10, 12 weeks, no, they can't do that. Now, I get that. So I decided I'm coming to Troy. I rented from the Hicks, brought all my stuff down to Troy. I had no idea about anything, nothing. And I said, okay, I'm just going. So I couch surfed for a while. And that's when I reached out to you, Pastor, that I said, you know what? I'm trying to recover from this amputation. I've caught another infection, which means the current situation is not healing. I need to lay my head somewhere for about 3 months. I reached out to him, and that's the last thing I wanted to do, because I've never asked for anything, and I find something wrong with it, but at the same time, I've leaned more towards, if people want to help you, allow them to help you. And that's something I've struggled with my whole entire life, okay? But when I reached out to Pastor, he said, well, okay, well, let me reach out to the congregation. Do you care if I put your name on? I said, sure. Well, Bill and Jerry Nolan stepped up to the plate, no questions asked. He grew up with both of our daughters. We know him, yada, 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 and I stayed with them, and I believe it was 3 months and maybe a week and a half. I mean, it was just like that. So before the 3 months is up, I drove through the neighborhood where I live now, and I was just kind of looking to see, and I said, okay, well, I'll call them. The very first place I called, that's where I live now, and I've been there ever since. But when we talk about struggles, another struggle that I've had, and I've somewhat said something to you about this before. Maybe I have, maybe I just dreamed it, I don't know. But I know I shared this to one of the teachers up at TES. And she had put something on Facebook regarding praying every single morning. And I said, you know what? I said, I've gotten to the point where when I grew up at First Baptist, I did that every single morning and every single night. Why do we venture away from that over time? Why? Because we as people, we tend to gravitate towards easy versus what's right. Seriously.
I think you're exactly right with that. We really do. If it's easy, yeah, we get in that rut. This is easy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's one thing I've struggled with. And anyone out there listening, even if you're a new Christian and you decide, oh, okay, well, I'm going to start praying more. If I'm only going to pray one time a day, let that be the first time in the morning. Why? It's just as important, if not more than important, than the first meal of the day. When they say, oh, the first meal of the day gets you going. But guess what? Put some Jesus in your morning too, and I guarantee you, you know, it will also, I'm not saying you're not going to be, there's not going to be obstacles in your way during the day, throughout the day. I'm not saying that. But the same way as technology, if you don't stay up with technology, it's going to leave you behind at some point in time. The same way happens in regards to, lost my train of thought there for a second, but in regards to praying and having a quiet time, because in my opinion, there's a huge difference between prayer and a quiet time. Prayer is something you do and you know, you see on Facebook and you says, well, okay, I need prayer, whatever. Okay, well, you may pray for somebody driving down the street. To me, that's not a quiet time. Why is it not a quiet time? Because there's too many distractions. Is there any reason God should not get your full attention during prayer, during a quiet time?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not saying there's not anything wrong with praying on a daily basis when you're driving down the road, but me personally, maybe y'all can do it. I can't. I have the hardest time because I used to be a truck driver too. And that has part of it. You're responsible for you're responsible for your equipment, you're responsible for everybody around you. And so that's how I drive my car every single day. You know, I'm just 360 degrees if I can.
Well, if you drive down I-35, you have got to be watching on things. Let me stop. Thomas, do we have any comments or questions? Put your mic on.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, we've had a few. We've actually had one come from Jacqueline. It says, from earlier, he says, you may not have kids, but you're always a part of some child's life, no matter blood or not. And Pastor Wayne Lott, who's watching us, said, God bless you, my brother, really enjoying you sharing what God has done in your life. And he just chimed in again as of us speaking. He said, amen, you must stay updated just like your phones are always being upgraded.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess the biggest thing for me, I'll bring up Janine Kojadarlik. We had a conversation a few years ago regarding her daughter playing basketball. And if y'all know her personality, I mean, it's very exuberant, it's kind of out there a little bit. And we had a laugh in regard to her speaking of her daughter fouling out of a basketball game. And she says, use them all up, honey. You have 5 fouls, use them all up. And,
Why can I hear that? Why can
Exactly. And I had to, at that time, it didn't mean anything to me, but ever since you asked me to do this, I've been thinking of little things that might be important. Because again, at the end of the day, that's the importance of someone's testimony, is hoping someone can get something out of it and apply it to their own life. Well, with that conversation, speaking of her daughter fouling out of a basketball game, well, next game, what happens? You get to hit the reset button, you get 5 more fouls, right? In your everyday life, essentially, we all get a reset button every single day. Every single day, you're blessed to wake up. You get a reset button. Reset button for what? Reset button for your life in general. Your faith, how you treat people, how kind you are, how many people you lead to the Lord. You get a reset button to do all those things again. But what if you didn't? Think about that. What if you didn't? I was at a funeral just yesterday. None of us are promised the next 2 minutes. We all need to, as Christians, make a better effort to lead people through the Lord. And I'm going to now talk about the time I've been here in Troy when I went through my second amputation. Okay? And the reason why I'm going here, because it's an extension of what I just said. I got to the point when I had recuperated from my first amputation. Now I decided, okay, I'm going to start driving big rigs again, because I drove off and on for about 11 years. I said, I'm going to start driving again. Well, I drove for Douglas Transportation right there behind Love's. And I told him what was going on, and he said, Craig, I lost a guy last year to diabetes. He goes, I'm going to hire you, but you need to take care of that. He was honest with me, okay? And I appreciated that. So I went to work for him, and about 8 weeks later, 8 weeks, that's it. All of a sudden, my neuropathy got a lot worse, because I was, sitting in the saddle, which is what we call the seats, sitting in the saddle a little more. And pain starts back, diabetes starts back. So now I catch another bone infection. So I ended up, to fast forward, I ended up getting my other pinky toe amputated. During that time, again, I didn't blame God, but I still had questions. And I think that's okay, whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian, to have questions. And my question was not why me, but trust and obey is what you were talking about this morning. Okay? Sorry.
It's okay.
I went through this, especially when I was out in the oil field. To sit here and say, you're making a lot of money. You can pay this off. You can pay this off. You can do this. You can do all these things. But how many times did I say, God, thank you? How many times did I say, God, thank you? So the only negative part about my amputation is when someone first said to me was, which toe did you, this is the first amputation, which toe did you get cut off? And I said, oh, my pinky toe. Oh, it's just a pinky toe. And I said, it's just a pinky toe because it's my toe and not your toe.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Isn't that the truth?
But I grew to understand, again, if not growing up in such a not only great church but great community, I would not be able to fast forward and say, you know what? Yes, I'm missing my 2 pinky toes. I have balance issues, but at the same time, I still have 8 left.
Amen. Yeah.
Seriously. And you have to, again, trust and obey. And also something else you said this morning was, I'll think of it here in a second. Obedience is, anyway, I'll have to think of it. You help me here in a second. But it's a situation where, yes, you have to think about not what God hasn't done for me, what has God done for me? Right. Because when we look at blessings, we look at blessings as always money. And I don't say me personally, I'm just saying we as a society. How much money can I make? Not about how happy I can be and what I do, it's how much money can I make. And sometimes we lose people along the way.
Yeah.
It just always making money. And it may be losing time with your family, your kids, your husband, your wife, whatever the case is. Some of the happiest people that I've seen in my day and time was people like myself when I was little. Again, yeah, we had an outhouse. There was many times I didn't want to go to the bathroom. Why? Because it was 5 degrees outside. Whatever it was, it happens. But we were the happiest. Why? Because our mother made it that way. She did not allow us to make excuses for ourselves. And that's something, as me being a substitute teacher, I try to convey with all the kids that I come in contact with. Don't make excuses for yourself. Okay, we can obviously see we have a problem or an issue. What are we going to do to change that?
Okay. Let me stop you right there as we go, because Thomas, I know we're getting close on there time-wise that we've got. Would you be able to come back next Sunday evening?
Mm-hmm. I told you I was long-winded.
Part B, folks, is coming. No, I think I think that's a good place to stop, and it's the cliffhangers that the old radio shows and TV
better.
shows and
Right.
that. And folks, Craig's going to be back this next week, and he's going to continue to share with us. And you have truly blessed me in what you have said, and I know you've blessed folks out there. And so, folks, let me get hold of some people and say, hey, next week, 6 o'clock.
Part 2.
You need to hear this, part 2 of this guy. And man, I'm excited about that. Thomas, do we have any other comments or questions that have come in?
Yeah, we had one from, actually we've had 2 now. Jennifer Taylor says the world needs more Craig Colemans.
I agree.
Amen. And Jerry Nolan, who we were talking about earlier, says Craig has a wonderful heart and attitude. He's an example of God's love for all to see.
Amen. Amen. And that is the truth. And so, folks, we're just going to stop right there, and then we're going to pick it up next week. And so you may have some questions or things that you would like to ask. Get those down, and next week you can send those in, or comments. And man, we'd be glad to talk about those. Craig, it has been a blessing. I can't wait till next week to hear what God is going to speak through you. And that is truly what I'm hearing, is God speaking through you as you are giving your testimony here. And I thank God for, it's hard to thank God for the paths that we walk as we're walking it. But as you look back, you realize that was the perfect path, because I wouldn't be here today if it had been any other way. And that's a great thing. What's the old song? I thank God for unanswered prayers, on there. So, folks, we're going to catch you next week. Man, I can't wait to continue on with this. And so we'll see you then. Kathy, I'm on my way home. See you later. Bye-bye.